Hey everyone. Technical difficulties here today. So for some reason, my internet is going in and out today. So if by chance it goes out while we're having class, I will be back. I can switch to a laptop, but always give me a few minutes. The general rule of thumb is 15. If a teacher drops out of class or shows up late, at 15 minutes, you can assume they're not coming. But before that, give me time. Hopefully it'll hold up. It'll hold out for us. All right. Anybody have any questions? Anything going on in your lives you want to share? Micah, it's nice to see you. Yeah.
Hello, it's good to see you too.
Great. Micah isn't usually able to come to class. So he is in our class, but not usually available for the live classes. So it's great that you're here. All right. If nobody has any questions, we will go ahead and get started. Give me 1 minute here. Are any of you guys in the path of the hurricane? All right. Micah, you are? Is it storming outside now?
Yeah, well, we had to evacuate, so we're in Georgia now.
Oh, wow, that's right. Michaela told me that you were
Yeah,
going. Yeah.
it was like
Wow.
right in our path. Yeah.
Have you heard anything about your town?
Um, no, not yet. I
Oh,
haven't looked yet.
yeah, that's rough. That's rough. All right, let's go ahead and get started then. Hopefully you can all see that where it says anatomy and physiology. Let me know if you cannot. Okay, so I don't know if Ben is here. Ben is not here yet. Maybe he'll come a little bit late. Well, Ben actually asked a question that was really good, and I wanted to discuss it with all of you guys. The question that he asked was, why don't we have oil on our palms and our soles? Remember, I asked that question in one of the quizzes. Why don't you? And he wanted to know, why, what's different about the skin. In other words, basically what he was asking is, if we don't need it there, why do we need it anywhere? If you don't need that oil on your palms, maybe you don't need it anywhere. So I did some research and I found some answers. So the skin that's on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet is different from the skin on the rest of your body. And that difference will help you to understand why some areas don't need that skin film the way other areas do. So here's why. Take a look at this gland right here. This is a sebaceous gland. So that secretes that oily substance called sebum. And that is what the grease on your skin, so to speak, is. That helps to create a moisture barrier. And it also protects you against bacteria. And it keeps your skin nice and soft and flexible. When you feel your skin drying out, a lot of times it's because you washed away the skin film. That you can start getting cracks in your fingers, and your on in your hands. So the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet don't have those sebaceous glands, so they don't get that protective layer of oil on them. Another thing that's different is the thickness of the skin. So the skin that's on your palms and on the bottoms of your feet is a lot thicker than other areas, and those cells are much denser than they are in other parts of your body. So that, of course, gives you more of a protection against wear and tear, against friction, against the exposure that your hands come to. Because even when you're all covered up, your hands aren't, right? So our hands are always exposed. We touch everything. Our hands interact with our environment. Now, because of that thickness, it doesn't need the same layer of protective oil in order to be resilient, in order to be able to heal quite as fast. Another thing that's different is that the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet need that tactile sensation. They need to be able to feel. So you need to be able to feel when you touch things. You need to be able to feel when you step on things. And a layer of oil would make it harder to do that. And it would also make it harder just to hold on to things. So you do have sweat glands. You actually have more sweat glands on the bottoms of your feet and the palms of your hands than you do on the rest of your body, most of the rest of your body. You know that if you ever have, if you ever take off your tennis shoes and whoop, the smell is bad, that's because there's so many sweat glands, and the bacteria will start eating the sweat off your feet. And that's what gives you that smell right there. So the extra sweat glands that we have, that extra water that you have on your palms and the soles of your feet, can help to regulate the temperature, cool you down. And it can give a little bit of moisture. A little bit of moisture on your hands makes it easier to grip things. And that can help to make up for that lack of oil as well. So given all that, you can understand why we don't have sweat glands. We don't need them. Thick skin is thicker. The water makes a difference. And the need for the oil just isn't there like it is on other parts of your skin. So given all that, do you think your fingertips produce sebum? Your fingerprint tips have? Is it just the palms? What do you think? Take a guess. Yes or no? Yeah, Anastasia, they don't. Actually, your fingertips don't produce sebum for the same reason. They don't have those sebaceous glands. So it's actually the palm all the way down. The whole palmar surface of your hand doesn't have those sebaceous glands on them. So it doesn't produce oil. But all the way down, it does produce more sweat to help with that moisture regulation and to enhance your grip. So again, you probably had sweaty palms. Sometimes you get, when you get nervous, you get sweaty palms. That's because there's so many sweat glands right there. All right. Anybody have any questions about that? Here, does the lack of oil production anything to do with the formation of calluses? Lack of oil production. I'm always reluctant to say no. I can tell you what forms calluses, and then we can figure it out together. So calluses form from use. When you put an area to increase use, your body reacts by thickening the skin there. And it especially thickens that epidermis, that outer layer. So you end up with this, what feels like, if it really doesn't have much sensation. If you ever had a callus and you try to touch it, it's not nearly as sensitive as the skin that's next to the callus because it's thickened up. So you're actually farther from the nerves when you're touching a callus. So how might oil production have anything to do with that? Possibly the oil would take a little bit of the rubbing. When if you rub your hands together real fast, they're going to warm up really quickly. If you put a layer of oil in there, you can rub for a really long time before it gets hot. So it's possible that the oil might prevent callus formation because it would keep that friction from causing any kind of damage there or causing thickening of the skin. So yeah, I can see in that way that would have an effect on that. Does it damage the nerves or just make it harder to get to them? Yeah, it just makes it harder to get to them. It's just thickening. So I just had another, I got to tell you guys, because, I like talking about my dog. I had a class right before this, a physical science class, and we did an experiment where we did baking soda and vinegar. You mix them together and they make the carbon dioxide. And my dog got scared by the experiment. So she's all over me. She wants to sit on my lap. So you'll see her peek up from time to time. She needs a little bit of comfort. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about skin cancer today. We're going to talk about cancer a few times this year when we're talking about different systems of the body. Skin cancer is so common that I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about it. It was mentioned in the skin disorders unit, the lesson, but I want to go into a little bit more detail. And I'll warn you right now, there are some pictures in this lesson that are a little bit hard to look at. Feel free to just close your eyes or look away if it bothers you. So when I say common, I mean common. 1 out of every 5 Americans will develop skin cancer at least once in their lives. So when I look at this group right here, 2 of you are going to have skin cancer if you're part of the norm. Now, 2 out of every 5 different kinds of cancer are skin cancer. And it's estimated that almost 10,000 people in the United States are diagnosed every single day with skin cancer. Pretty common. Yeah, I know. Now, it's important to know that most skin cancers are not deadly. So there's a couple of reasons for that. Anybody have any idea? Why do you think most skin cancers are not deadly? First of all, they're often caught easily because you can often see them. You might be able to see a lesion on your skin and that makes you go to the doctor and the doctor finds it quickly enough that it doesn't have time to do any damage. So where a tumor that is inside your body isn't able to be seen. Yeah, it doesn't affect a vital organ. Exactly. So it's not going to be, it's not going to cause pressure on other areas and start having symptoms like that. Skin replaces itself rapidly. Yeah, absolutely, it replaces itself rapidly. Problem is tumors behave a little bit differently. So cancer cells don't behave like other cancer cells. We will talk about that later in the year. But one thing that I can tell you right now is that when you have any kind of cancer, those cancer cells shut down the cell's regular ability to perform properly. So they have a lot of tricky ways at getting your body to let them be there. I mean, it has to get through your skin and multiply to get severe. Yeah, exactly, Micah. It has to be able to move beyond the skin in order to be a real problem. Now, the most common causes of skin cancer are rarely deadly, but they can spread to the area around them. And they can even spread to other parts of the body. But even there, they're usually not deadly. There's one deadly kind of skin. Kind of skin cancer. Anybody ever heard of it? You know what the one deadly kind of skin cancer is called? Yeah, good, Anastasia. It's called melanoma. Yeah. Now, skin cancer usually develops on areas of the skin that are exposed to the sun. So your face, your lips, maybe your scalp, your neck and your chest. Arms and legs more in women than in men, because women tend to spend more time intentionally getting sun than men do. But it also can form on areas that rarely see the light of the day. You can have skin cancer up underneath your hair, which is usually pretty protective. You can get it underneath your fingernails. You can get it on the bottoms of your feet. You can get it anywhere. And skin cancer affects everybody, no matter what your skin tone is. No problem, no problem. So including people who have dark complexions can still get skin cancer. Now, melanoma does occur in people who have darker skin tones, but it's more likely to occur in areas that are not normally exposed to the sun, like palms of the hands and soles of the feet, in people who have darker skin tones. Now, we talked about when we were talking about the skin, and we did our little trip through the skin, and we saw all those melanocytes that came in, and they deposited melanin over. You guys remember that image? The depositing the dots of melanin over the DNA to help to protect it. So those melanocytes do a really good job of protecting our DNA, but sometimes they're not quite enough. And most of the damage to the DNA in the skin cells comes from ultraviolet light. There's a couple places we get UV radiation. Where are they? Where's UV come from? That's fine. Yep, the sun is one. There's another one that I hope none of you use that you can get UV radiation on your skin. Tanning beds. Yep, absolutely. Those are the two primary places that damaging ultraviolet light comes from. Now, a couple of you guys mentioned tanning beds in your burn essay that you did, which is great. A lot of people really aren't aware of the dangers of tanning beds. And they can be very dangerous. They concentrate the exposure. But sun exposure, that doesn't explain the cancers that happen on areas that aren't exposed to sunlight. So we can know that there has to be something else at play here. There has to be some other factor that will contribute to your risk of skin cancer. So there's a couple of other things. They're all going to be the same things that we talk about when we talk about how to keep the different systems of the body healthy. Being exposed to toxic substances can predispose you to any kind of cancer, including skin cancer. Having a condition that weakens your immune response can make you more prone to getting a skin cancer. All right, so skin cancer begins in the very top layer. It starts in the epidermis, that outermost layer right here, where the dead skin cells are. So remember that the epidermis is that layer of protection. It's up to 50 cell layers thick. Remember that it's all these layered skin cells that overlap one another. Now, all of the stratums that we have here, those are all parts of the epidermis. So it isn't just these dead ones right here, all the way down to where the dermis starts. So these are all still living cells. It's in these living cells right here that we end up with skin cancer developing. Now, the epidermis has a couple different layers of cells. These squamous cells that are on the outside, they're just below the surface. The basal cells are at the very bottom, these stratum basale, they're at the very bottom, and that's where new skin cells come from. They're just below all those squished squamous cells. Then we have these melanocytes. That's this green one right here. So the melanocytes make melanin, and that's one of the pigments that gives skin its color. You also have some keratin in your skin that gives it the yellowish color, and you have the blood vessels underneath that give it the pinkish color. And all of our skin is some combination of the melanocyte color, the keratin color, and then the blood vessel color. Now, melanocytes, these cells right here, they produce more melanin when you're in the sun. First thing that your skin starts doing when you go out into the sun, those melanocytes creep in, they start depositing that melanin over the DNA of your cells, and they help to protect you. Now, where your skin cancer begins, where in these layers right here it begins, is going to determine the type and the options that you have for treatment. So people who live in that high intensity range, so that would be the oranges right there, those people have a much greater chance of developing skin cancer. Australia, not surprisingly, has the highest occurrence of that dangerous one, melanoma, in the world. 2 out of every 3 people who live in Australia will develop melanoma. It's a lot. Now, about 1 of every 7 Americans will develop melanoma. So you can tell right there if you're living in a high intensity area or a lower intensity area due to solar radiation. There's a couple different kinds of ultraviolet light. There's UVA and UVB. There's also a UVC, but the UVC is absorbed by the Earth's ozone layer, so it doesn't make its way in. The ones that make their way in are UVA, ultraviolet A, and ultraviolet B. Yeah, a lot of people are in the orange zone. Just got to be a little bit more careful if you're in the orange zone. The good news is people who live in the orange zones right here rarely have vitamin D deficiencies. People who live where it's blue, you probably have to supplement with vitamin D in the wintertime in order to get enough. Because if you can't get outside and be exposed to the sun, your skin can't make vitamin D. So there's a downside to both. All right, so this ultraviolet A, you can see right here how that penetrates all the way down. Ultraviolet A has long wavelengths, so it's associated with skin looking older. And about 95% of all the ultraviolet that comes from the sun is UVA, 95% that gets to Earth's surface. A lot of it's deflected away. Ultraviolet B has a shorter wavelength, so it's associated with burning. And it's thought to be the other 5%, but it's the UVB that's responsible for most skin cancer. Because it has shorter wavelengths, it can do more damage. Shorter wavelengths of light damage living tissue more than longer wavelengths do. So this slide shows a tumor that's moving or breaking up and traveling to different parts of the body. And a big part of the problem with any cancer is spreading to other parts of the body. There's a term for that. It's called metastasis. You can see it happening here. That happens when pieces of the tumor, individual cells break off, they get into the lymph system or into the blood vessels, and they travel through the body. Now, not all skin cancers metastasize, but when they do, even if they're not deadly, cancer can begin in other parts of the body. So here we can see the 3 major types of skin cancer. There's basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and that bad one, the damaging one, melanoma. Let's take a look at all 3. We'll start with basal cell carcinoma. So take a look there at the stratum basale layer. Remember, that's the base at the bottom, the basal cells. That's where basal cell carcinoma starts. That's why it's called basal cell carcinoma, because it starts in this basal layer. Now, this is the most common form of skin cancer, and it's the most frequently occurring form of all cancers. All the cancers together, this is the most common. In the United States alone, we estimate that there are a little under 4 million cases every year of this basal cell carcinoma. So they happen when these cells down in the basal layer basically start growing uncontrollably, and they're abnormally shaped and they behave abnormally. And it happens when DNA damage from exposure to that UVB changes those basal cells and it causes them to grow uncontrolled. So here's some symptoms of basal cell carcinoma. Open sores that don't heal, red patches, pink growths, shiny bumps, scar-like areas, and growths with slightly elevated rolled edges or a central indentation. Now, the thing is, they look different from person to person. They can look like open sores that don't heal, or they could look like closed sores that are just raised and pink. So at times they might itch or bleed or ooze. And usually these are in areas of the skin that are exposed to the sun. Now, the thing about them is they grow very slowly. Basal cell carcinoma grows very slowly. They're the most curable of all the cancers that there are. They don't cause very much damage when they're caught early, and understanding them can help you to detect them. Knowing I've got a sore on my face and it's just not healing, that's a time when you go to the doctor and you take a look at things. So most common of all cancers, but they don't usually spread. They grow very slowly and they're easy to treat and cure. There's actually a cream now that a dermatologist can put right on a basal cell carcinoma and it will destroy it. It doesn't even take surgery to get those out. So up to 90% of all skin cancers are this. Okay, now here come some of the pictures I warned you about at the beginning. All right, so this is a basal cell carcinoma. This is one that was allowed to grow and grow and grow. Now, it's not pressing on any really vital tissue. This guy probably doesn't have any symptoms from it. It might itch a little bit, but that probably is about it. So they typically start out as a shiny bump and then they grow. And they grow in this disfiguring mass like that. They don't very often move to other parts of the body. They just cut them off. Sometimes they might have radiation, but most of the time not. They can, though, cause great disfigurement if they're allowed to continue to grow and grow and grow. So it is something that you want to have removed when it's very small. Now, like I said, they don't very often spread beyond the tumor site, but they can become disfiguring. And if they are untreated, they can continue to grow, not just on the outside, like you saw in the pictures. They can grow deep. They can grow deep into the skin and they can destroy the skin. They can even destroy muscle and bone. So the longer a person waits to get treatment, the more likely it is that it will be hard to remove and then it might even come back. Now, there are a couple of cases where they are unusually aggressive, but even in those rare cases where they are aggressive, they're not very often life-threatening. They don't usually cause a problem. My friend's dad got skin cancer, and she used to never come out of the classroom without sunscreen. Sunscreen is a really complicated topic to talk about. So yes, a healthy sunscreen will help to prevent skin cancer. There is some thought that some of the cheaper ones that you buy that have a lot of chemicals in them might actually be causing some skin cancer. They might contain some ingredients that are harmful, that are toxic to the body. And in addition, remember this one right here, this picture, let me show you that one again, right here. There are some sunscreens that you can buy, and these would be the ones that are have a list of chemicals this long that do a really good job of blocking UVA, but don't really do a good job at blocking UVB. And UVB are the ones that cause cancer. So that's why it's complicated. Yes, a good natural sunscreen, one that has healthy ingredients, is going to go a long way toward protecting you from sun damage, including cancer, skin cancer. But the wrong kind can be a problem. All right, good question. Did we finish that one? Yes. Okay, so now let's talk about the next one. This is the second one. This is squamous cell carcinoma. And this starts out in cells called squamous cells, right? The squished ones. You can see them right in here. So this would be the basal cells right here. These would be the squamous cells right above the basal right there. So again, not usually life-threatening, but this can spread if it is left untreated. And the growth of this one, because of where it's located, can have some more complications than the basal cell one does. Once again, it's caused by too much of that UVB radiation. Now, this can be anywhere on the skin. This often happens in people who burn easily. So if you're a person who gets sunburn very easily, you're more likely to get squamous cell carcinoma. So it's usually found in the areas that are exposed to the sun. And people who have black and brown skin, it's more likely to be on areas that are not exposed to the sun. Interestingly, isn't it? So the darker your skin is, the more likely that these skin cancers are going to be in areas that don't see the sun. Not really completely sure about that. It can even happen inside your mouth or on the bottoms of your feet. So here are some of the symptoms of squamous cell carcinoma. There could be a firm bump on the skin called a nodule, might be the same color as your skin, or it might look different. It can be pink or red or black or brown, depending on the color of your skin. It can be a flat sore with a scaly crust or a raised area on an old scar or on an old sore. It can be rough and patchy, can become an open sore or a rough patch inside your mouth. Once again, lots of different possible symptoms of this skin cancer. So again, we got pictures coming. I'll give you warnings when there are not fun ones to look at. This is the side of a nose right here. This is a basal cell carcinoma. It's the second most common kind, but it is the most common one found in people who have darker skin. It can spread, but it doesn't usually spread. So this dark area right here is a squamous cell carcinoma. And people can die from this one. About 1,500 to 2,000 people die from this squamous cell because of the fact that it does grow into adjacent areas and can spread. So once again, people who have high melanin content are not immune to skin cancers. All right, the third kind of skin cancer is melanoma. This is the bad one. This is the serious one. I've had several cousins who died from melanoma, so it's kind of dear to my heart. It starts in cells called, what do you think? Melanoma. It's going to start in the melanocytes. Those melanocytes are the ones that creep in and deposit melanin. They're deep in the layer of the epidermis. They're between the layers of the basal cells. They're right in this area right here. They deposit the melanin. Now, melanoma can happen at any age, but it is more common in people who are older. And in comparison to most other kinds of cancer, it's also pretty common in young people. So most common in older, but more common than other types of cancer when you're young. Once again, the primary cause of this is damage from ultraviolet radiation, either from too much sunburn, or tanning beds will increase your chances of getting that melanoma. And these are the symptoms. So a lot of people think melanoma starts as a mole. It does sometimes, but it doesn't always. It can occur in skin that's otherwise normal looking. Basically, it's a good idea to keep an eye on your moles because a lot of melanomas do start there, but don't think that's the only place that they start. So normal moles are usually a uniform color. So they're all going to be one color across the whole mole. I have a lot of moles. You can almost connect the dots on my arm, but they're all the same color. They all have distinct borders, so you can see the skin right on the other side of the mole. They're usually oval or round, and they're usually smaller than 1/4 of an inch in diameter. They're smaller than the size of a pencil eraser. So anything bigger than that could be a problem. Anything that's irregular, so anything that is a different color or has multiple colors in it can be a problem. So here is the ABCDE rule of melanoma. This will help you to understand and identify the characteristics of abnormal moles that might be a sign of either a melanoma or another skin cancer. So A, that stands for asymmetrical shape. So look for a mole that has an unusual shape, irregular, like if it has two sides that are very different from one another, as opposed to being a nice round or oval sphere. B is for irregular border. So you're going to look for moles that have notched or scalloped borders. That's pretty characteristic of a melanoma. C is for a change in color. If a growth has multiple colors in it or is darker from one side to the other, then that could be a problem. D is for diameter. You want to look for something bigger than a pencil eraser. That's often something to go have checked out. And E is for evolving. Look for changes over time. That's why when you go to the doctor and they keep an eye on things, they'll often write down the size of your moles, especially a dermatologist will do that. So moles by themselves might change, but usually a changing mole is something to keep an eye on. Now, don't panic if you have a mole that has several different colors. There are a lot of non-cancerous moles that have more than one color, but if you're suspicious of something, it's always better to have your doctor check it out. That's the secret. So here's a picture of a melanoma. This is an example of a malignant melanoma. So you can see how it's got multiple colors, erratic border right there. It's different texture from one side to the other. So that would be something to have check out. And the reason that melanomas are, I've had one for fits this criteria. Yeah, so if it hasn't changed, that's probably not a problem. And probably your doctor has looked at it already. If you've had it for most of your life, it's been being watched. Yep. So the reason that melanomas are so dangerous is because unlike the other two kinds, they spread to other parts of the body. They metastasize quickly. Now, treatments for them include cutting them out, surgery, maybe chemotherapy, maybe radiation. So chemotherapy, chemo means chemical. Chemotherapy is therapy that uses a chemical poison to target these cells. It specifically targets cells that are growing too fast. Radiation then is going to shrink away the tumor. So in addition to making the tumor go away, these treatments can also reduce the pain because this is spreading under the surface. It isn't just what you see on the top. It can put pressure on surrounding tissues and that can hurt. As it pushes down into the area of the dermis where there are nerves, you can have a lot of pain. Okay, now this is a melanoma under this man's fingernail. So the nail has been removed so that they can get the tumor out. And here's a picture of a melanoma on the side of this woman's nose. I don't know why anybody would let it get that big. But this is the same woman after her melanoma was removed. Now, if you look closely, you can see the depression where the tumor once was located. So this is a little bit of a close-up right there of her scar. So you can see that. Now, right here, see the peeling that you can see on her skin? That's the result of a melanoma that has spread to her lymph system. And it has widespread effects. So that isn't a melanoma itself, it's a result of the spreading of the melanoma. Here's one on this girl's leg right here. Once again, you can see that's bigger than a pencil eraser and it's got that uneven margin right there. If we look at it close up, we can see that symmetry or that asymmetry right there. And here's another melanoma right here. It's kind of hard to see because it's the same color, but this is still a tumor right here. And it is still melanoma. It's not dark like the other one was, so they can be any colors. Like I said, the problem with melanomas is they often spread. They metastasize. So if you've heard of people who have stages of cancer, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 means it's spread. So right here, you can see it's gotten down into underlying tissues and it will move to other parts of the body. Stage 1 is just located right in the epidermis. Stage 2 is going to be down into the dermis. Stage 3 is farther down into the dermis. And then stage 4 is going to be into underlying tissues. So these melanoma cells, they can spread from that first stage. The first stage called a primary tumor. And they can grow very quickly. In as little as 6 weeks, they can spread to other parts of the body. So they're often called malignant because they spread so fast. And once a tumor of any kind reaches a blood vessel, it moves to other parts of the body. And get this, with all tumors, when they get to be about the size of a grain of sugar, tiny little grain of sugar, when they get to be about that big, they start sending signals to the blood vessels that attract the blood vessels to grow toward them. They grow their own blood supply. That's when they really start to spread, start to do some damage. Now, take a look at this from 1935 to 2000. This is how many per 100,000 people. Any thoughts why we see this? Why do we see an increase in the melanoma cases from 1 in 15,000 in 1935 to 1 in 75 in the year 2000? Yeah, we have been increasing our sunscreen use. Global warming, more people like to use tanning beds. Yeah. So there's a lot of possible thoughts. You know, like with everything else, correlation is not the same as causation, but it's thought that the increase in people using recreational time in the sun, People in the 1930s didn't have as much free time as you do. It's just the reality. People worked longer hours, and a lot of times they worked either in the sun or they were covered up. We have now more recreational time, and a lot of our recreation is outside. Like you said, Anastasia, they do use more tanning beds now. Tanning beds were not a thing back in the 30s, and it's suggested that even smaller swimsuits that men and women wear now could be part of the cause. We're exposing larger amounts of our skin to the sun than we were before. Tanning wasn't really a thing. That's right. That's right. Until, about the 1960s was when tanning became like a thing that people would try to do. They would try to lay out in the sun in order to get tan. Before that, it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't desirable. You're right. Now take a look at this picture. This isn't cancer. And it's also not a color enhanced warning photo. This is a warning to you though. She didn't read the warnings on her medicine. She was taking an antibiotic called tetracycline, and she went to a tanning bed. The antibiotic tetracycline amplifies the effects of UV light. So if you're on a medication that says stay out of the sun, stay out of the sun. There's a reason that it says to do that. All right. And we're done. That's the last of skin cancer. Anybody have, I'll get that picture off. Anybody have any questions about skin cancer? Any of you guys ever had a skin cancer removed? You're kind of young, but you're not too young. Can happen when you're young. Yeah. All right. Your grandparents have. Yeah, odds are pretty good that you know someone older who has had at least one skin cancer removed. And once you've had one, then you're more likely to get more. Okay, great question, Anastasia. Are physical barriers like clothing or barrier sunscreens helpful for melanoma? Once again, the sunscreen issue is complicated for the same reasons I said before. Melanomas are going to be caused by those UVB radiations. They're the ones that are more likely to cause the skin cancers. So if it is a good sunscreen, if it is applied correctly, and if it doesn't have any of those toxic chemicals in it that could be making things worse, then yes, it's going to be a good thing. Physical barriers are the best. Clothing, you can get clothing that has like an SPF or sun protection factor. You can get hats that have that. You can wear shirts that have it. A lot of the active wear that you have, like our Under Armour, a lot of Under Armour kind of clothing will have some kind of a barrier in, embedded in it that could be protective. The best thing to do. So what you want to do in order to get just the right amount of sun, that you make vitamin D, but not so much that you risk skin cancer or skin aging, is spend about half the amount of time in the sun that it takes you to feel like you're getting a sunburn. So if you're a person who sunburns easily, you probably know about how long you can stay. I can feel it when I'm starting to burn. Like, I've been in the sun too long. I can feel it, even when I'm just turning a little bit pink. So I know for me, that's about half an hour. After half an hour in midday sun, and I've got a burn. So I spend about 15 minutes a day in direct sun. Now, the darker your skin is, the more it's going to take. So you might be able to spend an hour or an hour and a half if you've got darker skin, or if you're lighter skin, but you tan easily. So some people get dark really quickly when they go out into the sun. And for them, they're not going to need quite as much protection because their body is providing that protection. Building up, spending a little time in the sun, like it, gets to be, let's say you live in one of those blue areas where you don't get sun in the wintertime. Now it's April and the sun's starting to come out. It's warmer outside. Don't go spend 3 hours in the sun on the first day that it's a nice day. Build up, spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30, increase your time. That allows your skin to adapt and put in more melanin, because that melanin is the best protection against skin cancer, as opposed, in addition to avoiding the things that we know could cause it. For your mom, it's like 10 minutes. Yeah. All right. I got really sunburned once to the point where I got little bumps all over my arms and legs. My doctor said it was a sun allergy. So what is a sun allergy? So, and we'll talk a lot about allergic reactions when we get to talking about the immune system. An allergic reaction is an overproduction of certain chemicals in response to something that triggers the production of those chemicals. Like if you've got hay fever, your body overproduces histamine when it's exposed to the pollen that's in the air. So you're having some kind of an IgG or a reaction. Again, this won't mean anything until we get to the immune system unit, and then hopefully it will. But yeah, you're having a chemical reaction inside your body to having too much sun. So it doesn't mean that you're forever allergic to the sun. It means you had a reaction this time to it. All right. All right. Anybody have any questions about that? All right. So I want to spend the rest of our time talking about this amazing skeletal system. So if you guys are keeping up with the due dates, which most of you are doing a phenomenal job of, you're already almost finished with the bones chapter. And on Monday, the bone exam is due. And then you're going to start learning about the bones that make up the skeleton or the skeletal system. So today I want to review bones themselves, the anatomy and the physiology of the bones themselves. All right. So last week, when you talked about bones, you learned that there are some functions that they have. There are 5 main functions of the bones in the skeleton. Anybody remember what any of them are? What are those 5 main functions that bones do? Talani.
They support the soft tissues. They protect the body cavities. They are the site of blood cells formation.
Yeah.
They act as muscles. They move. They are mineral storage, and that's all.
Yeah. All right. All right. Excellent. Excellent. So let's go through all those. So they definitely are points of attachment for your muscles. You couldn't move your muscles without your bones, right? If you were just muscle and no bone, the muscles wouldn't have anything to move. You would just be a pile on the floor of mush. So the bones give you that structure and allow for that kind of movement. Another thing that they do is support your body. So your backbone, think of all that your backbone has to hold up. It has to hold your head, and it has to support your whole upper body. All that one little small column of bones all the way down. A lot of support from the bones. Here's another one. They do protect your organs. So the bones of your skull protect your brain. The ribs and the rib cage, the spine, help to protect your lungs and your heart. And they, as Talani said, they make blood cells. So red blood cells and white blood cells are made in the bone marrow. That's in the center of the bone. They're not, and they're only, these red blood cells don't make themselves, they don't make copies of themselves like most of the rest of the cells in your body do. They have to be made new. And red blood cells only live for about 3 to 4 months. So you're constantly putting out new red blood cells from your bone marrow. And then, of course, we have storage. So they do store minerals like calcium and phosphorus for use by your body. This becomes really important because right now, you guys are all in the phase of life where your bodies are storing minerals. You're storing calcium. You're storing phosphorus. Once you get to be about 20 years old, that storage stops. Whatever's in there when you're 20, that's about all you're going to get. From that point on, you have to eat enough calcium in order to not draw calcium from your bones. Now, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but not much. There's a little bit of mineral storage that happens, but nothing like what your body needs. Nothing like what your body needs. There are some ways that you can increase mineral storage as you get older. One of those is doing some weight training, like strengthening exercises. That can actually increase the calcium that's in your bones, but not nearly like you're doing right now. Not nearly like you can do before you're 20 years old. So you want to be making lots of deposits into this calcium bank account that you have in your bones. Best way to do that is to eat calcium-rich food. Anybody have any idea what some calcium-rich foods are? Some calcium. Red meat actually surprisingly has a good bit of calcium in it. Calcium supplements behave differently. Yes, very differently, Anastasia, very differently. So milk, that would, so Lane, yes, if you're one of the 1 in 3 lucky Americans. 1 in 3 Americans can digest cow's milk and make good use of it. Of the other 2 and 3, about half of them, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't help and it doesn't hurt. And about half of them, it hurts them. They have some kind of either lactose intolerance or the calcium is not deposited correctly. So yeah, so calcium is not, milk, dairy products are not really the best form of calcium for most people. Thank you, Micah. Yeah, so some of the best sources of calcium are dark leafy greens are really good sources of calcium. Fish with bones is about the best that you can do. So if you like that canned salmon that has the bones in it, or canned sardines that have the bones in them, those bones are really soft. And eating those really soft bones is about the best thing that you can do. I try personally, because I'm older, I'm not depositing calcium anymore. I need to make sure I'm eating enough of it. So I try to have one of those kind of fishy, either canned salmon or canned sardines twice a week. Bone broth is going to have a very, very limited amount of calcium in it. Might have a little bit, but you in order to leach the calcium out of bones when you make bone broth, you would have to put so much acid in it, either lemon juice or vinegar, that you wouldn't be able to eat it. So just putting in a tablespoon or 2, some people throw a tablespoon in their bone broth, thinking that it will make the calcium content higher. It won't do it. You have to have a lot. Yeah, good question though. All right, so what are the 2 major parts of the skeletal system? So you're going to learn the major names of all the bones, but we group them into 2 main categories. Anybody know what those 2 main categories are? I'll give you a hint. One of them is in blue. All right, we haven't gotten there yet, so there's a reason you should know. This is called the axial skeleton, and it includes the skull, the spine, the ribs, and the sternum. So notice the pelvis is not in there. The scapula and the clavicle are not in there. It is just the skull, the spine, the ribs here, and this is the sternum, the breastbone right there. All right, the other part of the skeleton is everything else. Everything that's not in blue right there is called the appendicular skeleton. So that's going to be all the parts that make up the arms and the legs, and including the hips and the shoulder joints. All right, so axial skeleton, appendicular skeleton. Those are the 2 main categories of bones that we have. Now we have got 5 basic bone shapes. Let's talk about the 5 basic bone shapes. There we go. First are long bones. Find them where you have long parts, like the arms, the legs, the fingers. Those are going to be long. They tend to be long and narrow. And then the opposite of a long bone is a short bone. So you've got wrists and ankles are made up of short bones. So they would be kind of squishy looking, kind of cubical almost. Then you have flat bones. Look, you're going to find, look on this body going around where you're going to find the flat bones. Flat bones make up the skull, and they make up the sternum, which is the breastbone. This scapula is also a flat bone right there. Irregular bones are bones like the spine. And then the 5th one is called a sesamoid bone. These are bones that aren't connected to other bones directly. So it is like the kneecap. So your kneecap is called the patella, and it's embedded all the way around in tendon. Let's see here. Our metatarsals for fingers or toes. So here's the way I remember that. I drive a car with my hands, and when I'm walking, I might step in tar. That's how I remember. So metatarsals are the feet, because you might step in tar while you're walking. The carpals, metacarpals are the wrist bones. Metacarpals are the hand bones. Those you use to drive a car. So I know you drive a car with your feet too, but you know, I'd steer with a with a car. So carpals are hands, tarsals are, yeah, there is also carpal tunnel. Yeah, that's a carpal tunnel syndrome is where for some reason there's not quite enough room for the nerves that come all the way down. And usually carpal tunnel syndrome affects these first 3 fingers. So they'll be kind of numb. They might be tingly because there's compression of the nerves as they come through. You've got a really strong cartilage sleeve, like around the bottom of your hand right here, that holds them together. And if it's just a little too tight, for some reason, if there's a little inflammation or something down in that fascia that goes around there, that cartilage, then it can cause pressure on the nerve. That's carpal tunnel. So yeah, that's another good way to remember that. All right, so we also have the structure of bones. So bones are, you know, because the long bones are different than the irregular bones, we have to look at them differently, but let's look at just this typical structure of a typical long bone. So this right here, you have your epiphysis, and there's two of them. There's one at the bottom end, farther from the body. Distal, remember, means farther from where it attaches to the body, and then the epiphysis is at the end. Then you've got your proximal epiphysis. That's going to be up on this end here. Proximal is closer to where it attaches to the body. Then you have the shaft right here. This is the shaft of the bone, also called the diaphysis. So epiphysis on the end, diaphysis in the middle. And then inside that diaphysis, you've got your compact bone and then the blood vessels, and that's the marrow right there, where a lot of your red blood cells are made. All right, so you have 4 layers of most bones. Anybody remember what the outermost layer of a bone is called? The outermost layer of a bone starts with a P. This is the periosteum. I don't know, you might not have gotten to that yet in the lessons, so it's okay. This is kind of an introduction. So the periosteum, peri means beside, osteo refers to bone. So the periosteum is the like beside the bone. It's going to be the outermost layer. That periosteum has a lot of blood vessels in it. That's why it hurts so much to bang your bone up against something. You know, if you drop something on your foot and you hit that bone, or you bang your arm into something, it hurts a lot. It's also why a broken bone hurts a lot too. All right, now we have compact bone right underneath the periosteum. Then we have spongy bone right underneath the compact bone. And finally, you have that medullary canal that is filled with bone marrow. The marrow fills all the gaps, both inside the medullary canal and in this spongy bone. This will all be filled with marrow right here. Now there's red marrow and yellow marrow. See the yellow here? Yellow marrow is really fatty. It's got a lot of adipose tissue in it, where the red marrow has more just the blood cell factories that would be inside there. How are we doing on time here? All right, so let me show, I want to show you one quick thing. We'll talk about how strong bones are, and then I have a video I want to show you. So bones are very strong. Their bone makes them both strong and very lightweight. Now, about 20% of an adult's body weight is made of bone, and bone is made up of those 2 minerals that we talked about, calcium and phosphorus. So we'll end with this video talking about the strength of bone.
One of the strongest and most practical materials used by human beings is steel, because steel is both strong and flexible. Let us now compare steel to the structure of the bones in our bodies. First and foremost, the bones are many times stronger than steel. They are also 10 times more elastic than steel. Bones are also superior to steel in terms of lightness. In comparative terms, the human skeleton is 3 times lighter than steel. These properties of lightness and strength in the structure of bones are of vital importance. If the bones possessed only one of these features, if they were strong but heavy, for instance, then the human skeleton would be too heavy to bear.
So ounce for ounce, bone is stronger than steel. So a bar that's made of comparable size as a bone, a bar of steel, would weigh about 5 times more than the bone does. So 1 cubic inch of bone can bear a load of about 19,000 pounds. That's a lot. Roughly the weight of 4 or 5 pickup trucks. So bone is about 5 times stronger than concrete, but yet it's got that flexibility. All right. All right. I have a question here. And is it possible to bruise your bone? Yeah, it absolutely is. You're falling down a flight of stairs. Ooh, that hurts. And bruise your shin. And I hurt to put pressure on it for like a month. Yeah, you've done some damage to the periosteum. You probably broke some blood vessels around it. you did some damage to the muscles that would surround it. So yeah, that's what we call bruising a bone. A bruise is basically blood vessels that have ruptured. And it takes a little bit of time for those to go away. And when the blood is in a place where it's not supposed to be, you've got a little bit of inflammation in that area. It's very tender to the touch. So yeah, absolutely, it's possible to bruise a bone. Yep. All right, we're out of time. Anybody have any questions? All right, have fun learning about the skeletal system. Please make note that there is a contest coming up. So make sure that you look for the contest in the instructions for the lessons. All right, everybody have a terrific week. I'll see you next time. Thanks for coming. Bye.